Namaste, good evening, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our class on the Bhagavad Gita. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, we meditate upon you who were made known to Partha, Arjuna, by the Lord Narayana himself. You who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. You, the goddess who rains down the nectar of Advaita, non-dualism, in 18 chapters. You, the destroyer of relative existence. We worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the supreme delight of his mother Devaki, and the slayer of the demons, Kamsa and Chanura. We adore that supremely blissful Madhava, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So tonight we will continue our study of the Bhagavad Gita, and we are in chapter 18, the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and we are to take up verse 40. So probably we have, after tonight, we will probably have 3 more classes on the Bhagavad Gita before we come to the end of the text. Not to the end of our study of the text, because that it doesn't come to an end, but the end of this class on the Bhagavad Gita. So in what has immediately preceded verse 40, Sri Krishna was talking about the 3 gunas, again, as he had in chapter 14 and again in chapter, I believe it was 17. He spoke extensively about the gunas, and then in chapter 18, he brings up the same topic in various different areas. He talks about the 3 gunas. And so now in verse 40, he concludes the topic of the 3 gunas. And so we'll just start with the verse. I won't do any more review than that. Natarasti pritivyam va divi deveshu va punaha sattvam prakriti jayar muktam. Let me do that over again. Sattvam prakriti jayar muktam yadebhi syatribhir gunaihi. So here, natarasti pritivyam va divi deveshu va punaha. So there is, and then sattvam from the next line. There is no thing, sattvam, meaning a being, something which has existence. There is no being in the world. There's no being here in the world, nor in the celestial realms, the heavenly worlds, nor among the gods, deveshu va punaha, or again among the gods. So there's no being here in this universe, in the celestial regions, or among the gods. Prakriti jair muktam yadebhi syat tribhir gunaihi, which is free from the three gunas, which are born of Prakriti. So the running translation is, there is no such entity in the world, or again among the gods in heaven, which can be free from the three gunas born of nature. And again, I would translate it differently from what I just read in the given translation here, because it actually separates this world or in celestial regions or among the gods. So there is no such entity in the world or again in the celestial regions or among the gods, which are free from the three gunas born of nature. So again, Prakriti as nature doesn't mean, as we know now, doesn't mean what the English word nature means. In English, the word nature means everything that's not touched by human beings. That is the natural world, the natural environment, other than human modifications of the natural environment. That is nature. So if we want to go out into nature, we leave the cities, which are created by human beings, and we go out into the trees and the forest, the lakes and the fields and the mountains, etc. And the less affected by human touch, the more natural it is. So that is nature in English. But Prakriti, which is translated as nature because there's no better word for it in English, Prakriti means the very source of this everything here itself, including human nature. Human beings are not outside of nature. Again, in English, and in English-speaking countries, we make a distinction between the human world and the natural world. But in Vedanta, there's no such distinction. We're as much a part of nature as everything else. And as I've explained on occasion, nature means everything revealed to the senses, everything that is mental at the mental realm, everything that is short of the absolute. Brahman itself, Satchidananda Brahma. Everything other than Brahman, the transcendent, absolute, everything else is nature. Even the gods are within nature. And so nature can be spoken of as everything that is created, and it can also be spoken of as the source of all creation, that is, the creative power out of which all of this has come. So this is Prakriti, this is nature, and also Prakriti is that source out of which all of this has come, the creative Shakti, the creative power out of which all of manifestation at all levels of manifestation have come. And so Prakriti, or nature, is as comprehensive as a term can get, except that it does not include the absolute reality, Brahman, the transcendent reality, which is pure consciousness itself. So there's no such entity in this world, or again among the gods, or in the celestial realms, which is free from the three gunas born of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So as we have discussed quite extensively in the chapters I mentioned that deal with the gunas, the gunas govern everything here, the physical nature, everything mental, and even the gods are within the realm of Prakriti, and therefore they're within the realm of the gunas. Ishvara, that is the supreme God, is beyond the gunas, but even Ishvara is adorned by the gunas. God as the supreme reality, the person in personal form, is free of the gunas, unbound by the gunas, and yet the Lord of the gunas, and thereby associated with the gunas, even though free of them. So Krishna, who speaks of himself in terms of the personal God, much as Jesus spoke of himself in the Christian Bible, He is free of the gunas, and yet the gunas are his powers. He's the master of the gunas, not the slave of them as we are. So everything here, physical, mental, celestial, is governed by sattva, rajas, and tamas, and which we know by now. Sattva is characterized by luminosity, tranquility, purity, transparency, clarity, etc. Rajas, which is characterized by action and reaction, passion, desire, hatred, etc. The pairs of opposites, involvement in the pairs of opposites. And tamas is lethargy, laziness, destructive tendencies, destruction just for destruction's sake, and darkness, ignorance, etc. So these three constituents of nature. Prakriti is said to be trigunatmika. That is, Prakriti, nature, in its root form, its primordial form, as the source of everything, is said to be composed of the three gunas. That is, the three gunas are the very constituents of nature itself. So when nature is regarded as Shakti, which is not being discussed here, but when nature is regarded as Shakti, that is the Divine Mother, then the Divine Mother is God, the Supreme God in personal form, and the three gunas are her powers through which all of this creation takes place. But when we speak of Prakriti, usually we're speaking of Prakriti not as the Divine Mother, but Prakriti just in principle, as nature, as composed of the three gunas. And everything here is a manifestation of the influence of these three gunas acting within themselves and on themselves. So there's nothing which is not composed of and affected by the three gunas. Nothing which can be free from the three gunas born of nature, of Prakriti. So then we come to verse 41, which says, Brahmana Kshatriya Visham Shudranam cha parantapa karmani pravibhaktani swabhava prabhavair gunaihi. So here, I said that verse 40 ended the topic of the gunas. Well, yes, it does in a sense end the main topic on the gunas. Now he comes to the topic of caste in verse 41 and several verses after that. But because, as he says in verse 40, everything here is governed by the gunas, so the concept of caste also is influenced by the three gunas. But he doesn't discuss it in that way from the standpoint of the three gunas. So that's why I said in verse 40, he really ends the topic as it had been discussed for a number of verses. So here, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Visha, or Vish, Shudra, the four traditional castes of India, the Brahmana or the priestly caste, the Kshatriya or the warrior, administrative, kingly, princely caste. So Kshatriya could be any of those, could be a warrior, could be a prince, could be a king. The Vish, which are the Vaishyas, they are the merchants, and then the Shudras, which are the servant class, as he'll explain. So these four castes, O Parantapa, addressing Arjuna, O scorcher of your enemies, O Arjuna, Karmani, the actions of these four castes, O Parantapa, are distinguished, pravibhaktani, swabhava prabhavair gunaihi, by the gunas born of the gunas which are born of their swabhava, their nature, or which are produced by their nature. So the idea is that each of us is born into this world with a nature which is predominantly sattvic or rajasic or tamasic, or sattva inspired or rajas inspired by sattva, rajas inspired by tamas, or sattva inspired by rajas, etc. All of these three gunas in their combinations, all of us have one or more guna predominant. And so he's saying that the running translation is, O scorcher of enemies, meaning Arjuna, the duties of the Brahmanas, or the actions, the duties of the Brahmanas, the karmas, so yes, the duties of the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras have been fully classified by the gunas, which are the sources of their dispositions. So the gunas are the sources of the dispositions of the four castes. And so let me go through the verses on the castes, discussing each one, and then I will come back and discuss caste itself. Not that it has great significance in its traditional form for us now, but it is good to understand it because it does form a part of the traditional knowledge. And so why should that be so? How did it work? So verse 42 says, Shamo damastapa shaucham kshantir arjamameva cha jnanam vijnanamastikhyam brahma karma swabhavajam. So this says that the Brahma karma swabhavajam, that the duties which are natural to a Brahmin. So he takes up first the Brahmin, the priestly class. The duties which are natural to the Brahmin, that is that the duties which a Brahmin should adhere to, should take up, are shama, that is control of the mind, controlling the mind's tendency to run after the senses, to keep the mind peaceful, tranquil, and self-centered. Not self-centered in the bad sense in English, but self-centered in the sense of self-controlled. So the duties are shama, control of the mind, dhamma, control of the senses themselves, control of the eye's wish to look in all directions, the ears to hear everything that's going on, the hands or the skin to touch everything and feel everything, the hands' desire to grab, the feet's desire to move, etc., the mouth's desire to speak. So shama, the control of the mind, dhamma, the control of the senses themselves. And then tapa, austerity, is also a duty of the Brahmin, to observe self-control, including physical practices like fasting at appropriate times, keeping vigil at appropriate times, and doing other austerities, both physical and mental austerities. So that's the duty of the Brahmin. And then shaucham. That shaucham means purity, but it also means cleanliness. So interior shaucham refers to purity of mind, keeping the mind pure. Pure means that which is not mixed with things that don't belong there. And so the mind which is pure is one which stays with spiritual thoughts. The mind which is impure is one which is thinking of all sorts of other things that it doesn't need to think about. But external shaucham means cleanliness. That was considered a necessary virtue, as it's explained in the Yoga Sutras and in Vedantic texts like the Bhagavad Gita, that as Shakespeare says, cleanliness is next to godliness. And so in the Hindu tradition, it was considered that physical cleanliness is a necessary spiritual discipline. It's not just a social practice for being able to live comfortably with other people. It's actually a spiritual discipline. And it explains in the Yoga Sutras, or I should say the Yoga Sutras explain, that through cleanliness, one develops a detachment from the body. Why? How does that work psychologically? Because when we keep the body clean, we begin to have a distaste for, a natural distaste for, not in a bad phobia kind of sense or anything, but a natural distaste for things that are physical, because we see that the body is always tending towards getting dirty. It needs to be washed every day in order to keep it clean. And so we develop a distaste for physical things. That is, if we don't practice basic cleanliness and regular cleanliness, then we're used to all sorts of dirt, and then nothing makes any difference to us. So cleanliness gives us a sense of internal and external purity. So shocham. Then kshanti, Kshanti, not shanti, which is peace, but kshanti means forgiveness, having an attitude of forgiveness towards others. And it also, kshanti also means forbearance. In fact, forbearance is probably the better general translation of kshanti, forbearance. Forbearing with others, forbearing with circumstances, forbearing with natural and social difficulties. And then arjavam. So these, again, are all duties of the Brahmin. Arjavam, straightforwardness, to be straightforward. As Swami Vivekananda said, strike straight from the shoulder, using the English expression. Strike straight from the shoulder. Be like the lion, don't be like the fox. The lion, with one swat with its paw, it dispenses with things. But the fox is always going around behind, sneakily trying to nip at the heels of others. And so be straightforward. Then jnanam, knowledge, is also the duty of a Brahmin. And then vijnanam, that can be interpreted in different ways. Jnanam means knowledge. Vijnanam means specialized knowledge. Nowadays, vijnana in modern Indian, Sanskritic Indian languages, vijnana means science. But of course, that meaning was not current at the time of the Gita. That's a modern use of the term vijnana, a legitimate use, but a modern use. But vijnana can mean experiential knowledge of the truth, or it can mean, as it's interpreted here, it can mean knowledge of the rites and rituals of the Vedas. And that's probably the best meaning for it when describing the duties of a Brahmin. And then finally, astikyam. Astikyam comes from asti, which means is. And so astikyam means belief in the reality of God and the scriptures. So astikyam means, in that sense, it means faith. Faith in the truth of the existence of God and the truth of the scriptures. So Brahma Karma Swabhavajam. These are the duties of a Brahmin, which are Swabhavajam, which are natural, we're born out of their nature, which are natural to their Swabhava, to their own nature. So again, the running translation is, the natural duties of a Brahmin are control of the internal organ, the mind, and the external organs, the sense organs and organs of action, austerity, purity, and cleanliness, forgiveness or forbearance, as I said, straightforwardness, knowledge, as also proficiency in Vedic ritual and experience of Brahman and faith. So these are the duties of a Brahmin. So a true Brahmin is one who tries to practice these things, who makes these practices or these duties part of their life. So in traditional India, the Brahmin was the repository of culture, and learning. It was considered that there had to be a body of people who were protected from the other difficulties of life, not in the sense of having wealth. No, the Brahmins were traditionally among the poorest people in India, but they were protected from having to do other things, so that they could dedicate themselves to the cultivation of knowledge and be the repository of the culture of the nation. And so that we see here. One of the ideas of the caste system, and again, I'll come back and discuss caste more thoroughly after I get through these next two verses also. But one of the ideas of the caste system is that the higher the caste, the more restricted the life one should live. The lower the caste, the more freedom you have. The higher the caste, the more is expected of you, as in the Western concept of noblesse oblige, the obligations of the people of privilege in society. So yes, Brahmins were privileged, but their privilege was a privilege of knowledge and culture, not of wealth, and not of freedom to go about and do whatever they wanted to do. Their lives were supposed to be, and in traditional times usually were, lives of the greatest austerity and restriction. So when you read in the life of Sri Ramakrishna about his father, who was a Brahmin, of course, you see what an extraordinarily simple and austere life he lived. His whole life was dedicated to worship of the deities and performing worship for others, giving scriptural opinions in times of doubt among the population, and advising people on the basis of the scriptures. He wouldn't accept gifts from anybody, a life of great poverty and a life of great austerity, great simplicity. But he, the father of Sri Ramakrishna, really lived the ideal of the Brahmin. So these are the duties of a Brahmin. Next we come in verse 43 to the duties of the Kshatriya, the warrior class or the administrative class. Shauryam tejo dhritir dakshyam yuddhe chapya palayanam danam ishvara bhavascha kshatriya karma swabhavajam kshatra karma swabhavajam. So here, kshatra karma, the duties of a kshatriya, here the word kshatra, which means kshatriya, the duties of a kshatriya, which are swabhavajam, which are natural to the kshatriya. Those duties which are natural to a kshatriya are shauryam. Shauryam means heroism. So a warrior, a prince, a king, and warriors have to be heroic. So heroism, tejas. Tejas means the boldness, with the tremendous energy and tremendous boldness. So heroism, boldness, dhriti, that means fortitude. So again, you can see how all of this fits together. Each of these words may seem synonymous, but each of them, even in English, what to speak of the Sanskrit original, each gives a slightly different view of the qualities of a kshatriya. They're not exactly synonyms, they're closely related concepts of heroism, boldness, fortitude, and then dakshyam. Daksha means to be capable of something, and dakshyam means capability. The English word is escaping me. It doesn't matter. It means the abstract noun, the capability. So one who is capable, one who is adept at meeting different situations and figuring out what to do. So one who is skilled at meeting every situation. Again, you can see how that fits with the ideal of a warrior. And then yudhe cha api apalayanam. Apalayanam means running away, retreating or running away out of fear. And so yudhe apalayanam means in battle not running away. So again, you have heroism, you have boldness, you have fortitude, you have capability, that is the ability to meet every situation, and the quality of not retreating, not running away in fear from battle. And then dhanam, generosity. So the Brahmin is supposed to be devoted to knowledge and teaching and priestly duties, and not to the collection of wealth. But warriors, kings, princes, they tend to collect wealth by the very nature of their work, their natural duties. And so they are to be generous. So it's not that Brahmins shouldn't be generous, but Brahmins are generous with knowledge. Kshatriyas are generous with wealth and with material things. So generosity and Ishvara Bhava. Ishvara Bhava. Ishvara means God, and Bhava means the attitude. So a godly attitude, but here it means lordliness, because Ishvara means not just God in the spiritual, religious sense, but it also means Lord. Just as in English, Lord means a person who is in charge in the old societies, and it also means God. So in the same way, Ishvara can mean a person who is a lord, or it can mean God. And so Ishvara Bhava means lordliness. That is the quality of the good qualities of being a lord. In modern society, those qualities of lordliness and so forth, they're usually universally criticized as belonging to an old feudal society and so forth. But no, each society has had its virtues. And so lordliness is not a negative. Lordliness is the quality of being lordly, which includes the quality of caring for those under one's charge, as you see with the Pandavas and others who manifested the quality of lordliness in a good way. Sri Ram, who is the embodiment of lordliness in the Ramayana, etc. So again, the natural duties of a Kshatriya are heroism, boldness, fortitude, capability, and also not retreating in battle, as well as generosity and lordliness. And then 44 speaks of the last two castes. Krishi Gaurakshya Vanijyam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam Paricharyatmakam Karma Shudrasyapi Swabhavajam. So the first line of the verse speaks of the Vaishya, the merchant. So Krishi, that is farming, Gaurakshya, cattle rearing, and Varnijyam, merchants, being a merchant. Vaishya karma swabhavajam are the actions or the duties which are natural to the Vaishya. So the Vaishya was traditionally to take care of merchant activity. They were to take care of the farming and to take care of the raising of cattle, which of course often went with a specialty within the field of farming. And then the last line about the Shudra says, Paricharyatmakam karma, Shudrasyapi swabhavajam. So the work, the karma, the duty, which is natural, swabhavajam, to the Shudra, is service, paricharyatmakam, the service industries, the service work. So these were the four traditional castes. The Brahmin, whose duties were all around the protection and preservation and cultivation of culture. The Kshatriya, whose duties were around protecting society, governing and protecting society. The Vaishya, the merchants, the bourgeois activities of society, what we would once have called the bourgeois activities of the merchant and as well as the farmer. And then the Shudra was one who was employed in the service activities. And so it was considered in Indian society that these were the natural divisions of society. When we, with our modern mind and modern education, which has come out of the ideals of democracy and the rejection of feudal notions of the old society, and the rejection of the idea of kings and queens and emperors and so forth, Uh, Many of us grow up with a distaste for the very subject of caste. But we have to remember that it was this which kept India a living society and a stable society for thousands of years, going back to prehistoric times. Whereas most societies have risen, had a period of glory, and then disappeared. Indian society continued from ancient times to the present. And part of it, again, was the stability given to it by the system of caste. Were there problems with it and were there abuses? Yes, of course, that nobody would deny. Is it something we should institute now? No, that no one is calling for that. The institution of caste, it's something that India is to decide for itself what to do about caste. Though you find the traditional ideas disappearing in India just by a natural process of the natural process of modernizing the society. But did it have a purpose? Yes. Every institution we find in society, even those that have been abused, had a purpose. The existence of kings and queens had a purpose. The existence of lords had a purpose. It may be that a society outlives the purpose of those institutions, and then the institutions themselves become corrupted because of human nature, and they become destructive, and then they become chains on the feet of society. But we should remember that society is a living organism which develops structures in an organic system. It wasn't that there were a group of ancient people who sat around and decided, well, let's make up a system for society. And so let's make up, we'll divide everybody into four groups. And you be the Shudras, you'll be the ones who serve the rest of us, and you'll be the ones who take care of farming and merchant activities, and then you'll be the warriors, and I'll be and my people will be the Brahmins, and we'll be the top of society, and we'll divide it up this way. No, all of the institutions of society, including our own modern institutions, have developed organically as a response to the necessity of running a society. And as Swami Vivekananda showed, caste in some form is present in all societies. One of the features of caste is the effort to reduce competition. Now, in modern American society, especially more than anywhere in the world, we have been conditioned to think that competition is what all good things come out of. But if we look at society clear-eyed, without just prejudices that we have learned from school and from society and from politicians, we see everywhere in society the effort to limit competition, because no one wants to live in a dog-eat-dog world. And so you see that the rich people in our society are constantly trying to maintain their wealth and to keep the poor from joining their ranks by sharing wealth. And so you see so much effort at propaganda to say that whether you believe it or not, I'm not talking about the truth or the falsity of it, but it is propaganda, whether it's true or false. So much propaganda that they're the makers and the takers in society. That the rich people are those who deserve to be rich because they earned it, and the poor people are just the takers. They just want free handouts. And so we have to fight against that and keep the takers from taking away from the wealthy, because the wealthy deserve what they earned. And so you see all sorts of social, governmental, regulatory structures which are aimed at preserving the wealth of the wealthy. So there is a form of caste in all society. When I was a brahmacharian in Chicago, back in the early 1970s, Swami Bhashyananda, who was in charge of the Chicago Center where I joined, he was invited to a talk show in Chicago television. And he asked me and a couple of the young brahmacharians to go with him. And so we were all on this television show. We didn't speak, we were just sitting there. And the interview was really between the host of this talk show, TV talk show, and Swami Bhashyananda. And so while we were waiting it was going to be filmed, it wasn't a live show. And so while we were waiting to be filmed, the host said, well, we're ready, after he discussed things with the Swami for a little bit. Then he said, okay, we're ready to go. Where are the cameramen? Where are the sound men and everything? And they said, well, everybody's here, but the man who plugs in your microphone, he's on break. And so the host said, somebody else plug it in. All you'd have to do is take this, you take that, they're lying right there, go like that, and then we can get started. And they said, no, we can't do that. It turned out that there was a union, and I'm not saying this against unions, I'm just showing how caste works and develops in every society. The man who had the job of putting those two cords together, without him, no one could touch it, or everyone would walk off the set in protest of breaking the union. And so we had to wait sitting there, and the host had to wait, as well as his guests, for half an hour, while the man who did this was on his coffee break. And so that is the tendency towards caste. And at that time in Chicago, one of our brahmacharians wanted to learn plumbing and to apprentice himself to a plumber so that he could learn plumbing, so that he could do the plumbing for our society. He had to join the union, but he couldn't get into the union because you had to have a family member or a very close friend in the union before you could get in. So it had become hereditary. So again, I'm not speaking against it. I'm saying that why was that done? It was for the elimination of competition. And that was what the caste system was designed to do, to remove the competition in society so that a person would have the work to be done. I remember once, again, referring to Swami Bhashyananda, under whom I joined, he used to tell us a story about how he was from a Brahmin family, a poor Brahmin family, and he went from his town of Akola in Maharashtra to Nagpur to go to the university. And so when he came back from Nagpur on his first break from school, after some months at school, his father noticed that his hair was nicely trimmed and everything. And so his father said, who cuts your hair and shaves your beard? And Swami Bhashyananda said, I do it myself. That's easy. I do it myself. And so his father said, if you do that yourself, who is going to feed the family of the barber? No, don't do that. That is the barber's work to do. That's how he earns his money. If you do everything yourself, then who's going to feed the farmer, either the barber? So the idea was that everyone should have their proper place in society, and that place should be protected, and it should be honored as well. Again, that respect given to the barber. The barber is a low caste in India, but again, that idea that no, that's the barber's due. He must be protected as well. And so that was the idea of caste, the idea that everyone had their place. So again, I'm not recommending it for the modern world. The modern world is evolving its own structures, and that it will do organically. No one is going to be able to sit around and through a committee decide how society should be structured. It's going to grow organically. We may think about it, we may make all sorts of plans, but it's going to structure itself in an organic way, just as the body structures itself. So we don't need to worry about that. But this structure of caste grew for a particular reason, and it had a good reason for its existence. Has it been abused? Yes. Have there been bad things that came out of it? Yes, there have. But name one institution in any society at any time, including our own, which doesn't have abuses. Our own system of democracy has so many abuses. We see it every day. And that's why politicians keep rising and saying, when I get to Washington, I'm going to do it right. And under me, there will be no more corruption. And under me, there will be no more cheating. And under me, things will be set right. And they get to Washington, and it's the same old story. So again, we should look at history with a kind eye and realize that someday, not very far off at all, someday people are going to look back on us in today's society and say, what in the world were those people doing? Were they idiots? Were they fools? Or were they just criminal? What were they doing? Because society changes, the standards change, the expectations change. One more thing, again, I don't want to give a whole class on the caste system because that's not pertinent to our spiritual lives, but I do think we should understand it because it's the main thing people think of when they think of Hinduism, and it's something that is in the modern world universally reviled, and that shouldn't be. If we looked at ourselves and really with clear eyes, then we wouldn't revile others because we'd see everybody is just struggling to make do and societies find their own way to solve problems. But one other thing let me say about the caste system, well, let me reaffirm something I already said, and that is that part of the purpose of the caste system was to give everybody a place so that everybody had their place, their duties, their responsibilities. And as we'll see in the coming verses, the idea in traditional society was that if one performed their duties, whatever their duties were, whether they were high or low, that they could attain to liberation by the proper performance of their duty. So one of the abuses of the caste system has been the denigration of manual labor. That shouldn't be, and that's not the fault of the system itself. It's the fault of human beings, as I said, just as our society has plenty of democratic abuses everywhere. It's not the fault of democracy, it's because people, we're all people. And so in the caste system, that denigration of manual labor, and the idea that I will only do one type of thing and I'm too good to do some other type of work. Oh, no, that is an unfortunate result of the caste system, but that was not a design feature. That's a flaw that has come into it. So the one other thing that I wanted to say was the hereditary part. If, as in India, it was and still is largely among many of the majority of people, if you believe in reincarnation, and if you believe that you are reborn in circumstances that are appropriate to your karmic need, that in past lives you have developed certain qualities and certain needs, things that you need to develop, things that you need to learn, ways that you need to express yourself, then it's only natural. And again, I'm not advising it. I'm just explaining what happened. It's only natural that in time, caste became purely hereditary. In early times, there's lots of scriptural evidence that people moved between castes, but later it became strictly hereditary. That also was a natural process, just as in the labor unions, as I told in Chicago from my experience, that in order to get into the plumbers union or the electrical workers union, you had to have a family member already there, or they wouldn't even consider you in order to protect their pay scale, so that there weren't too many in the union, and everyone's pay would go down. And so it was in the Indian context, because people believed in reincarnation, and they believed that you were reborn in circumstances that were appropriate to your need, it was natural to think that one would be born into the caste that one needed. And so if I'm born into a farmer's caste, it's natural to think that that's because that's what I had earned in my past karma, that's where I needed to be. And so from that, you see how when that is taken in too fundamental, too absolute, too strict a sense, then it becomes impossible to move from caste to caste. And so again, I'm not saying that that was a good thing, but it was a natural outcome of the belief, and a belief that I hold, that one is born in the circumstances we need in order to further our spiritual evolution because of our past karma. So again, finally, let me reaffirm what I said. that we should look on history and the history of different cultures with open eyes and sympathy, and not with the judgment of preconceived notions and prejudices that we in the modern world have. We like to think that we are the first people who don't have any prejudices. That's not true. We're full of prejudices. So let's go forward. So the natural duties of a Vaishya are agriculture, cattle rearing, and trade. Of a Shudra too, the natural duty is in the form of service. So then we come to 45. Swe swe karmanya bhirata samsiddhim labhate naraha swakarma nirata siddhim yata vindati tatshrinu. So here, being devoted to one's own duty. A person attains to complete success. So again, this idea that by devotedly doing one's duty with detachment, one attains to complete success. Here, as to how one devoted to one's own duty achieves success. So here he says, I'm going to explain how by devotion to duty one achieves success. So one of the beauties of the Gita and of the Mahabharata is that the Gita, of course, belongs to the Mahabharata. So the whole Mahabharata, including the Gita, is the idea that by devotion to duty, whatever your duty is, you can attain to perfection. And so therefore you find in the Mahabharata the Vyadhi Gita, the Gita of the butcher. That is the butcher who attained to perfection by doing his duty in the proper way. So a butcher, of course, in traditional Indian society was a low caste because it lives by killing and slaughtering animals and chopping them up and feeding them, selling the meat to people. Just as in England, a butcher was not allowed to serve on a jury because it was considered that a butcher is by nature cruel because they're cutting up animals all the time. And so I'm not supporting that either. I'm just reporting that that's what the law was. It may not be there in England anymore, but it used to be. The butcher was not allowed to serve on a jury. And so in India also, the butcher's work was considered low work. But there is in the Mahabharata the song of the butcher, where the butcher explains how it was he attained to perfection, spiritual perfection, liberation, through the proper performance of his work as a butcher. So being devoted to his own duty, one attains complete success. Here as to how one devoted to one's own duty achieves success. And let me take another verse here. Yata pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmana tamabhyarchya siddhim vindati manavaha. This says that a human being achieves success by worship through his own duties, worship of him, God, through his own duties, him from whom is the origin of everything here, of all beings, and by whom all of this is pervaded. The yata pravittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam, from whom all beings have come, that is, out of whom all beings have been created, and by whom everything here is pervaded. That Lord is worshipped by one by performing their duties, and thereby a human being attains to success, attains to perfection. So again, the running translation, a human being achieves success, or siddhi actually means perfection. Achieves perfection by adoring through his own duties God, who is the origin of all beings and by whom all of this is pervaded. So again, that idea that by doing one's duty, that which is in front of one which needs to be done, by doing that devotedly as worship of God, one attains to perfection. And 47, Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanushthitat Swabhava niyatam karma kurvan apnoti kilbisham. This is the first line is the same as the first line of verse 35 in chapter 3. Shrayan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanushtitat. One's own duty, even if it is defective, is superior to another's duty well performed. So doing someone else's duty well is not as good as doing your own duty, even if your duty is defective. By performing a duty as dictated by one's own nature, one does not incur sin. So the idea here, in the context of the Gita, Arjuna wanted to give up fighting on the battlefield. He wanted to take to the life of a mendicant, wander and beg for his food, rather than to harm people on the battlefield, which one would think is a very noble thing, a very great thing. He wanted to renounce the world and live on alms rather than to kill his relatives on the battlefield. But here Sri Krishna is saying that by performing a duty as dictated by one's own nature, so Arjuna, by performing his duty as a warrior, which he had been trained to do, one does not incur sin. So Arjuna, fighting on the battlefield, in accordance with his dharma, in accordance with the rules of engagement, in accordance with the way that a righteous person is to engage in battle, when battle is called for, one incurs no sin by the acts on the battlefield done in that context. And so that's the significance here. One's own duty, even though defective, like that of a warrior, killing people on the battlefield, one's own duty, even though defective, or the duty of a butcher, is superior to another's duty well performed. So Arjuna would do better by doing his duty on the battlefield, that for which he had been trained, educated, prepared, than by going to the duty of a Brahmin and renouncing everything and wandering on his own. By performing a duty as dictated by one's own nature, swabhava, one does not incur sin, even if the duty is defective. So here we'll stop for today, and next week, we will start on verse 48. So if there is a question or two after announcements, I will take them, if they exist. So for announcements, on Thursday, this coming Thursday, there will be the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class at 11 o'clock in the morning. On Sunday, we have question and answer Sunday. And so if you have any questions that you would like to ask, I will make a lecture out of the questions that I am asked. So please send me an email, either at my personal email if you have that, or you can send it to the corporate email, or the organizational, I should say. I don't like corporate. The organizational email, info@houstonvedanta.org, which you can get from our website, of course. So send your questions to either email address, and I will make the lecture out of them. Those are the announcements for now. One last announcement let me make, and that is that Sri Ramakrishna's puja will be on the 14th of March this year. And we also will have Shivaratri a couple of days before that. I think it's on the 12th, but I won't say for sure because I'm not sure right at the moment. We will have Shivaratri and we will have Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, but both will be broadcast over YouTube. Shivaratri will be short. Combine the 4 watches into 1 watch. Usually it's 4 watches of the night, going from evening until the next early morning. But we will do it all in 1 watch in the evening. And Sri Ramakrishna's puja will be on the Sunday the 14th. And after the Sri Ramakrishna puja, people will be able to come and offer pushpanjali, offer flowers, and bow to the shrine. So we'll send out a flyer with the timings and everything. So don't worry about that. We will send out, and we'll post it on the website as well. So are there any questions, Surenji? Yeah.
People are not doing what they're supposed to do. Brahmana is not doing what he's supposed to do, and Kshatriya is not doing what they are doing. Is that
Okay, good. What's that? Yes. No, a good question. What the question is that in India today, people are not people that born even now into families that belong to particular castes, which has come down from ancient times. But the people are not doing the work of their particular caste. So is that good or is it bad for society? Is it better for society that now caste is disappearing, or is it worse for society? And so first, let me just say a bit about the fact of the situation in India. And where, as you mentioned in the Constitution, the discrimination according to caste and all of that, and observance of caste according to keeping people in traditional roles, that is banned in the Constitution. So is that good or is it bad for society? You find that Brahmins, whose duties included performing rituals and maintaining the culture and education of society, that now you find Brahmins who are business people, who are doctors and lawyers and other things. You find Kshatriyas whose duty was to be warriors, princes, kings, etc., and administrators. You find them similarly. You find them they're doing all kinds of work. You find Shudras whose duty was was the service industries. You find them as university professors and university presidents and so forth. So the traditional structure of the caste, which was defined according to one's occupation and duties within that occupation, that has fallen apart. So is that good or is it bad? So I have no idea whether in the long run it's good or it's bad. That society itself will determine, and society itself will in time adjust to the new circumstances. Either caste will be restructured if it's found that that's advantageous to society, because as I said, caste in all societies has served a purpose, or it may disappear and something completely different may arise. That's hard to say. It's difficult to think that it would disappear completely, because it is a practice which has lasted for thousands of years. So that in India, even among Christians who have been Christians for many generations in India, you find caste Christians. You find the Sikhs, they were not observant of caste, but you find among the Sikhs that the idea of caste has in some form come in. Even among Muslims, there is some vestigial form of caste which is there. So it has been so much a part of society. I have no idea whether it will continue. But this I believe, because Swami Vivekananda saw it. He said, this is not, when he was things like this, he said, were not his speculation, but he saw the future of India. That a great new future is developing within India. We see only right now the struggles as the communities and people and structures are dislocated. And so lots of struggles in India. But that's part of the process of society finding its way into the future. And so I'm convinced, because of the tremendous spiritual and intellectual impulse Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother gave to India, that the way forward will reveal itself in Indian society. So questions here. Is a Brahmana endowed with predominance of sattva, Kshatriya with rajas, Vaishya rajas, and some tamas, and Shudra tamas, and some rajas? That was the traditional idea. But there you see the flaw in the traditional idea, because you find Shudras who are very sattvic, and you find Brahmins who are very tamasic. And so that's one of the arguments against maintaining the traditional structure, because of that. Again, that was the traditional idea, but it doesn't hold much for in actual experience. For those of us who are or were employed in regular employment, are they considered Shudra and self-employed folks, Vaishyas, etc.? Well, that's hard to say. That's hard to say because there's so much mixture and so forth now that it's hard to apply the old labels to the mixture that we see at present. But we can say, again, that the concept of a Brahmana is one who is devoted more to the acquisition of knowledge, culture, and self-control. The Kshatriya is one who tends towards leadership, administration, etc., and also military type occupations. Not just the military, but military type occupations. The Vaishya engaged in commerce and so forth, and the Shudra engaged in the service industries. Or is it determined by the mental makeup and predominance of one guna over the others? Yes, and that is what you find today. You find that people of whatever caste, traditional caste they have, they're finding their ways into occupations according to their predilections and their talents. And then Jayant, referring to 1840, God is beyond the gunas, unbounded by the gunas, etc. But we do attribute all good, all beautiful to describe God, how to reconcile. Yes. Yes, so Sri Ramanuja says, the great philosopher of devotion, Ramanuja, he said that God is the repository of all beneficent qualities, of all beauty, all goodness, all truth, truth, goodness, and beauty. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. That he's the embodiment of that. So the idea there is that God being the totality, God being the reality and the totality, not being under the control of the gunas as we are. We are controlled by the gunas. The gunas make me sleepy one moment, they make me hyper the next moment, and then it perhaps makes me calm and tranquil and reflective, etc. And not because that's what I want it to be, it's the gunas pushing me around. But God is not under the control of the gunas. The gunas are the decorations of God. That is, the gunas are the instruments of God, or the gunas are the glories of God. And so God is not controlled by them. And because he, she, it is the totality, the infinite totality, it is pure sattva. That are, of course, beyond the gunas, but as we see within the gunas, we see the totality from the standpoint of Shuddha Sattva, pure Sattva, even though God is beyond even Sattva. In the Chandogya Upanishad, it says, Nalpe Sukhamasti, there is no happiness in the small, the insignificant. Bhumaiva Sukham, only the infinite is bliss itself. And so God is the infinite. And so being the infinite, being the totality, being all conscious, being absolutely free, identified with Brahman, but appearing through the gunas, it's the sattva aspect that shines through, the glorious aspect that shines through. So with that, I will close with our usual chant. Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutastun Vanti Divyaistavai Vedai Sanghapada Kramopanishadair Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidu Sura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We bow to that Supreme Being, whom Brahma and other gods praise with divine hymns, whose glories the singers of the Sama hymns sing through the Vedas and Upanishads, whom the yogis see with their minds absorbed in that through meditation, and whose end and beginning neither the gods nor the asuras know. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe.